There was a time in Makkah when saying that there is only one God was not simply a religious statement. It was a challenge to an entire system. A system built on inherited beliefs, tribal power, social status, and fear. And the first people who accepted Islam did not have an army behind them. Some had no tribe powerful enough to protect them. Some were enslaved. Some were outsiders. And one woman would eventually pay for her faith with her life. So how did a small group of powerless believers survive a city determined to silence them? The answer begins with something much more powerful than physical strength: conviction. In the early days of Islam, the message of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was simple at its core: worship Allah alone and abandon the idols that had become part of Makkah's religious and social order. For people with wealth and tribal protection, accepting Islam was already a serious decision. But for the vulnerable, the consequences could be devastating. The Quraysh did not see every new Muslim in the same way. A powerful man had relatives who could defend him. A protected family had influence. But those without strong protection were exposed. And among the people who suffered most was a man whose name would eventually become associated with one of the most enduring declarations of faith in Islamic history: Bilal ibn Rabah, radiyallahu anhu. He was an enslaved man in Makkah. After accepting Islam, he was subjected to severe persecution. Reports describe him being exposed to the intense heat and subjected to brutal treatment, while refusing to abandon his belief in Allah's oneness. A narration in Sunan ibn Majah specifically records Bilal among the early Muslims publicly declaring Islam, and describes how he continued saying, Ahad, Ahad, one, despite the abuse. Think about what that means. The people hurting him had control over his body, but they could not control what he believed. And that distinction is the heart of this entire story. Because Islam was not merely changing what these people said, it was changing what they believed they ultimately belonged to. Bilal's story also reveals another side of the early Muslim community. Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu used his wealth to help oppressed believers, including Bilal. Historical reports differ over the precise price involved in Bilal's liberation, so the safest point is the one that matters most. Abu Bakr paid to secure his freedom, and Bilal was no longer enslaved. One man had been treated as property. Another man used his wealth to help restore his freedom. But the persecution did not end. Another family would soon become one of the clearest symbols of sacrifice in early Islamic history: the family of Yasir. Yasir ibn Amir, his wife Sumayyah bint Khayyat, and their son Ammar were among the early Muslims. Their position in Makkah left them especially vulnerable to persecution. Sources describing the early period record the family being subjected to severe abuse because of their faith. And then came the moment that changed Islamic history forever. Sumayyah radiyallahu anha became the first martyr of Islam. She was not a military commander. She did not lead an army. She did not stand behind a fortress. She was a woman facing persecution with nothing worldly that could guarantee her safety. Yet she became the first known person in the Muslim community to give her life for her faith. Her husband Yasir also died during this period of persecution, while their son Ammar survived. And this is where the story becomes bigger than one family. Because the early Muslims were discovering that faith could demand patience before it brought victory. There were no palaces, no political power, no armies, only a growing community learning how to remain faithful under pressure. That community needed somewhere to learn, worship, and build itself away from the immediate pressure of Makkah. Traditions of the early Makkan period identify the house of Al-Arqam as an important gathering place for the early Muslims and for the teaching of the new faith. It was not a palace, it was not a fortress, but places like this mattered, because movements are not built only through public victories. They are built quietly. One person learns, then teaches another. One heart changes, then another, and slowly, what looked insignificant from the outside begins to reshape history. That is the part of the story we often miss. The first Muslims were not powerful because they had suddenly become stronger than everyone around them. They were powerful because persecution had failed to determine what they believed. Bilal was still a former slave. Sumayyah was still vulnerable. Ammar had still witnessed unbearable suffering, but their circumstances could not decide the value of their faith. And that is why the story of early Islam in Makkah is not simply a story about torture. It is a story about transformation. A society that measured people by tribe and status was confronted by a message that placed ultimate honor somewhere else. A person once treated as property could stand spiritually equal before Allah. A woman with almost no worldly protection could become one of the most honored figures in the story of Islam. And a small group meeting quietly in Makkah would eventually become the foundation of a civilization. But the persecution was not the end. It was only the beginning. Because soon, the believers would face a decision even greater than enduring Makkah. They would have to leave it, and the next chapter would take them beyond the familiar streets of their own city, toward a Christian king in Abyssinia, a new test of faith, and a dramatic confrontation that would show the world what this new community truly believed. The question was no longer simply, can they survive? It was, how far will they go for the truth they have chosen?